Yup, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got into this situation. It all started back in 2005, when a Neopets game changed the gaming landscape as we knew it. Or something like that anyway. Neopets, the darkest Faerie. You either love it, hate it, or you never heard of it. There's no in between. I'm in the former category, and though the fandom for it is extremely populated and well known, there aren't that many videos that go in depth about this game, and for understandable reason. I guess if someone's gotta take out the hero's cape, it might as well be me, the guy who did a camera recorded let's play of the game 8 years ago.
Nice!
The game originally developed on the PS1 before moving to the PS2. It's basically an action-adventure RPG game with open-world elements, and it takes elements from several different genres. Do all these elements come together to make a memorable experience, or is it all just a broken, buggy mess? The answer is both! In some ways, it's provided some of my most memorable experiences in gaming, though you can put a lot of that on nostalgia. But I also recognize how the game has serious design flaws in certain areas. The game isn't exactly fully polished, and is very easily exploitable if you know what to do. Rest assured that my nostalgia won't cloud my analysis on this decade-and-a-half-year-old PS2 game. So come with me, as we journey into the wonderful, incredible world of Neopets. So the game starts off with a great evil awakening from the depths of the ocean. Also, every cutscene is hilariously bad CGI. And then we cut to you playing as a DeviantArt character on a farm. You start off as Torment, but later on you'll gain access to Roberta. And I'll get into more of them gameplay-wise later, but first, I do want to touch briefly on the story. I know you're probably expecting some grandiose tale of epic proportions from an old PS2 game, but, don't get your hopes up. Okay, it's not terrible. There are a small amount of character growth moments with Torment that I felt like Roberta didn't quite provide, but really, other than that, the story is very cookie-cutter, and it's clear the moment you start up the game. Evil awakens, your job is to stop evil, that's it. It's very much a standard hero's tale, and there isn't anything inherently wrong with that, but if you're expecting quality writing on the level of Xenoblade, then this game isn't for you. Though, one thing worth mentioning is that all across the world, you'll be able to read books in various shops, libraries, and sometimes even dungeons. A lot of these are just tutorials for pretty basic stuff, like being able to eat red and purple pumpkins to restore your energy, but some of them do contain small amounts of lore within them, be they about the world, bio-information on monsters, or backstories of certain characters. It's not much, but it's a nice touch regardless, and I found myself enjoying the small amounts of text I did read when I was a kid playing this game. It felt like one of those things that didn't necessarily need to be added, but I'm glad they did. Through these texts and some of the story, there's a certain amount of Neopets lore built up within the world of this game, especially in the final act within Altador, which is neat for those who are into that sort of thing. There's even an online exclusive epilogue of the story, which I'll provide the link of in the description. Though there are some moments within the writing you can discover that are surprisingly adult for how much of a kid's game this can be, mainly within the graveyard areas. There are some pretty dark jokes on these things that, as an adult, crack me up. It does show that there was at least some portion of the writing that was dedicated for the 5 adults playing this Neopets game, which is something I would have liked to see expanded upon. Other than that, there's really not much else to talk about with the story, so on to the gameplay. Your first major task in the world of Neopets, the Darkest Faerie, is to hurt some not horses and get frustrated at how fucking stupid their AI is. The first level that you're thrown into gives a small taste of what the game's going to be like. In this small farm area, there are several different pathways you can take that can lead to some chests, one of which teaches you how slow this game's climbing is. There's also an area in which you can encounter some small plant monsters that throw goop at you, but you can't do anything to them because you don't have a weapon. This is actually something that I find to be smart. The game gives you a taste of enemies to deal with, and later on, once you get a sword from your dad, you can go and fuck them up. Kid me found this really cathartic after I legit died to these flower monsters cause I didn't know what to do with them. So after you herd the horse creatures, you do some more chores for your parents, including fetching your dad's pliers who for some reason lift them on the roof? Also, fall damage isn't a thing in this game unless it's in water or a pit. Then you fix the water pump, get a sword from your dad, and go up to deliver a package for your dad who willingly sends you off to bandits, crows, and dragon creatures just so you can deliver a package. But nah, it's fine, cause your wooden sword will protect you, and is also
not a toy.
Father of the Year right here. So after your dad sends you into the lion's outside den with only a wooden sword, you get an idea of the combat by stopping an old frogman from getting robbed. The combat in this game is weird. It's not this game's strong suit, I'll fully admit that. When you first get sent out into the world and you have no idea how to use your sword, chances are you'll just rapidly press the circle button over and over just to swing it. But later on, once you become a squire, you learn how to actually use your weapon in a free hit combo attack. Once you learn this combo attack, it basically becomes your bread and butter for defeating most enemies. And well, it does get pretty lazy just using the same combo over and over. Now, there are enemies that this combo doesn't work on, such as flying enemies, which will be countered by the other character on this game's cover, and also enemies that occasionally shield themselves. From my experience replaying this game over and over though, in most cases, the best strategy is just pressing the circle button 3 times in a row, unless you're surrounded, in which case there's the spin attack. This makes most enemy encounters very samey and not varied much. As a result, the combat doesn't feel that fleshed out, and I think they could have done more to make the combat more engaging. As a side note though, just like how the game gives a taste of enemies before getting your first weapon, I'll also say that I find it a smart thing to only bring awareness of the free hit combo attack once you become a squire. It's a good way of immersing Tor's inexperience with swordplay to the player. If you're a new player, then it makes sense that the best Unga Bunga strategy you want to do is just mash the attack button as fast as you can. But once you learn how to do the combo attack, then you're dealing with enemies much better than how you started out. It's a cool way of integrating a character's arc into the gameplay. Of course, upon replays, you could just do the combo attack from the start like it's nothing. You also later on get a shield, although I'll be honest, I never used this much, mainly because I just found that spamming the free hit combo was the best strategy. Though there is a cheese tactic you can do to break through animation frames with using the shield and combo attacks. It can also be used to reflect projectiles if you have the proper mote equipped, which, speaking of which, let's talk about the 6 attributes, motes. Motes are elemental balls that are found in the overworld and can be applied to your weapon, armor, and shield. You've got
Fire, earth, light, the dark side, water, and wind.
While I never used motes much when playing the game, some of these attacks can be pretty broken, like the rock mode attack, where you just send boulders on your enemies. And then you've got Nova modes, which contain every element and are the most powerful. Use the opposite element against enemies and you get more damage, and use the same element on your armor and shield to decrease damage and reflect projectiles. Holding down the attack button also allows you to do a super move against enemies depending on the mode you used. And while they do provide battle advantages if you're struggling with a tricky enemy, fuck you minion wizards and artilleries, they were never something I found to be an essential part of the combat that I relied on much. I've gone through many playthroughs without using any motes on my gear, aside from when I had to use them in tutorials. They do give you more options to play with, yes, but some can just go too far and trivialize the game's combat should you go crazy with them. As such, I wouldn't call their implementations terrible, but I wouldn't call them great either. I bet when I went over some of the first minutes of this game, you were thinking I would analyze the whole story from start to finish. Well, you've been tricked. Much like how halfway through the story, Torb escapes through the sewers. From a reminder that if you've been enjoying this video and want to see more, be sure to subscribe to Rabbit Luigi and click the bell for notifications to be informed of every new video. So just when you think the story is going to rise up even more after escaping that monstrosity, suddenly you discover that there's multiple acts to this 2005 Neopets game, and without warning you get to play as the other main character. This is Roberta, and instead of killing dragons with swords, you shoot magic with wands. Just like Tor, the optimal strategy is to kill enemies with a free hit combo. She's not good against ground enemies, since they grow actual brain cells and shield themselves against magic attacks, but she is good against flying and fast enemies. Also, each of the wands she can wield have their own individual elements to them before equipping most to change them, unless you're Fiora's Rod, in which case you just destroy everything. The idea is that you're supposed to use both characters to cover certain situations, though there are a few problems in its execution. The first is that the time it takes to switch between both characters is a bit too long for my liking. It's something that can be annoying if you want to switch to another character just to kill a single enemy. But that leads into the other problem. Most of the enemies in this game are ground-based enemies that can be taken care of with Tor's free sword combo, save for some annoying minion enemies. While like with Tor, there are mode attack with the wands that can be really powerful and broken, it's not something I felt the need or want to do in most situations because the Unga Bunga strategy of just using the same free hit combo is just so brainless and easy that in a lot of situations, it's just the most efficient way to kill enemies because a lot of enemies can't even counter when doing the combo. You just spam it over and over until they're dead. Of course, there are cases of enemies actually giving a hard time when not comboing them to death, but I wouldn't say they represent the majority. Though, one enemy that does provide a challenge to the combat that doesn't come often in the game is the Death Knight. The Death Knight is an enemy that only pops up on 2 occasions throughout the game. The first at the end of the Warloop Graveyard Crypts and again in the Knight's Crypts. And should you hit him, he will immediately counter you with his own sword swing, and this will continue as long as you keep hitting him. He can even cause the slowdown status with his attacks. This single enemy challenges the typical combat tactics more so than any other enemy in the game, and he actually provides a decent challenge. Orylen did a let's play of the game and covers this enemy more in depth in this video here, which I definitely recommend checking out. He goes over different strategies to use against this enemy. This enemy shows what combat could have been like if more enemies were like the Death Knight, Dark Spikes notwithstanding. Another area that exposes the lackluster combat is the bosses. They range from okay to, well, just sucking. Some are pretty good, like the Gillard Assassin, Warloop King, Black Knight, and the Undead Drake. These fights work because they feel like real duels, and have a wide array of attacks they can throw you. Then you have fights like the Plague Serpent, which has no boss music and as a result is tedious and boring. The Ixie Chieftain, which, well, yeah. And the Darkest Faerie herself is just a glorified minion gauntlet, which ends with not much happening in it despite being built up throughout the entire game. It sucks. Even though there are some good bosses in the mix here, I would say there are more mediocre / bad ones that are prevalent. Overall, I would say the combat is one of the weaker areas that the game could have improved on, but there is still basis for which they could have brought out the potential of the combat. Believe me, if I let my nostalgia speak for myself here, I'd basically be like,
it wasn't that bad, I still had fun with it, so it's no problem.
But I've played this game enough times to know that I've been using the same brain-dead strategy for most enemies, which is definitely a problem. Oh, and side note, you can also strafe by pressing the L2 and R2 buttons, but it's incredibly awkward to work with, and a few times I use it, which just makes it a hindrance, and remember, just keep doing the same combo over and over. Don't get the wrong idea though, just because the combat strategies can be pretty brainless, that doesn't mean the game is easy. Once the land becomes corrupted due to the Darkest Faerie being really salty that if you are a 1v1 in a Fox vs Falco Val Destination match, these little, and big, gremlin creatures called minions show up, and some of them can be really ruthless. In most cases, it's not even a requirement to fight them unless you really want to get some good rewards from them, but then again, this game already hand-fists good items into your asshole by the second if you've been doing a lot of exploring, which leads into the thing that I like most about this game. Okay, maybe that title's a slight exaggeration, but only slight. There's a surprising amount you can do in this game. Right out of the gate, when you get into some of the first areas after getting your sword, you get a good idea of how a lot of this game is structured. You get to solve some of these farmers' problems in side quests, which include killing oversized mutant plants, killing crows, killing spiders, and playing hide and seek.
Don't do that last one.
One of those things I just mentioned allows you to access a mini dungeon-like area with chests and a treasure map. This treasure map will be marked on the map for you to find later in a future area. You're able to buy lots of these all across the world, which provides some fun stuff to collect. Though, if you go out of your way to collect everything, it can make you a bit overpowered on the item department, which I'll get into later. After you solve all of their problems and one T-Rex's crop is presumably forever ruined, the next area you go to has you help out a prince get back his golden rose to give to his beloved. You do this by going into a nearby cave that has lots of bandits attempting to rob you. This is one of the early game areas, and already you can be swarmed by enemies. If you're not careful, this can easily mess you up. Though the combo does of course make this significantly easier. After you get the Midas Touch Rose back for him, he wants you to go deliver it in his stead, which you won't be able to do until 2 more acts in the game. So get ready to have this one quest annoy your OCD by not going away for a while. After you nearly get your package stolen by tiny Roadrunner hamster thieves and literally James Arnold Taylor saves your ass, even more areas open up for you to check out and do even more side quests, which include but are not limited to grave robbing a nearby tower by beating up one of the skeletons and stealing its skull for a cow wizard, controlling the population of Draconax, yes that's what they're called, and getting reprimanded if you make them go extinct, killing more spiders for the fluids, fighting in a gauntlet with enemies that you won't see for several more hours, and playing Wheel of Fortune. And as I mentioned before, there's lots of treasure maps to buy too, providing even more reason to go out and explore. Also, every town will typically sell upgrades for your sword, wand, armor, and shield. This is what I mean when I compare this game to Breath of the Wild, and not just cause one of the areas is a big open field. You could certainly go back to the main story, but with how much there is to do, completing every side quest and opening every chest has provided me lots of play hours whenever replaying this game. It's easily the thing I enjoy most out of this game. Though there is sort of one issue that puts a dent on how much exploration you can do in this game.
Backtracking.
Being a 2005 PS2 game, there's of course no fast travel, and since the map is massive, if you're out to complete every single side quest there is, get ready to hold down the R1 button a lot. There are potions you can buy called Mirka speed potions that speed up your character to help with this aspect, but even then it still takes a while. There's literally one side quest in a chain of quests where you have to run all the way from one edge of the map to the other in order to deliver a package. Sounds familiar, huh? And then having to go back in order to get the next side quest. I guess Neopets loves treating its players like USPS employees without cars. It can get really tiresome trekking from one area to another. On top of that, while going out of your way to do every side quest and open every treasure is rewarding and fun, the caveat that comes with that is that the game kinda becomes easier than it already is. Many times, chests will contain items that can restore all your health, magic, or even both at once. Chances are you'll be swarmed by silver necks by the end of the game. It's also fairly easy to get lots of money this way, allowing you to, guess what, buy even more of those full heal items. Items in general are scattered throughout the world, whether it be in chests or just cutting down bushes. One of the type of chests you can open involves you equipping the proper mode to strike at the chest. These chests usually contain random rewards, which has resulted in getting some hilariously overpowered items in the early game. If the game wasn't already brain dead from the Unga Bunga combo, then getting a stupid amount of healing items makes it even easier. Also, one minor mechanic that exists that I often forget about is Pet Pets, the inferior prototype of Put Put. There are several different types of these across the world, and feeding them gives you buffs to different types of stats, such as attack, magic, and max health. The Termac buffs all stats, but it requires a lot of food. The Meowclops is the most noteworthy simply because it can unlock a hidden tower shop run by a not evil spirit. Other than that, it's a minor mechanic that tends to drain resources, but it does capture some of that Neopet spirit. There's also one big thing that shocks me about this game, considering everything that it has established prior, and that is the total lack of replayability. After you beat the ultimate evil and talk to some dudes, which by the way, some people can appear in the aftermath if you completed certain side quests, which is pretty cool. You see the ending, credits roll, and that's it. You're sent back to the title screen as if you beat Ganondorf in Zelda. My question is, why? You're telling me that after all the exploration this game has to offer, all the things there is to do in this world, and all the quests, you're just gonna wave goodbye without an encore performance? It would have been so great to just be sent back to Meridell in the world, now being saved, and get some kind of post-game. Give some side quests, maybe even a super boss, just something, anything. This is the thing that frustrates me about this game the most, and I felt this way even as a kid. For how much the game gives you to enjoy this world and discover every little secret it has, not having any kind of post-game whatsoever is such a waste of potential, and it goes back on everything the game is trying to do. Maybe what I'm suggesting sounds like too much, or maybe I'm just spoiled by modern games. This is once again an old PS2 game. Still, if the gods of this world answered my prayers and decided that an old Neopets game from the early 2000s deserves a second chance and gives it a remaster, the one thing I would ask for the most is some kind of post-game content. Anything at all would go a long way towards rewarding the player for beating the story and giving them more reason to go back and explore this huge and expansive world. With all of that said though, I'd be lying if I said that those cons stopped me from enjoying exploring the world and doing quests for everyone. Aside from, of course, lack of replayability, grumble grumble. Not that those things aren't problems, they're pretty glaring in some cases, but even still, there's a certain magic that the world has for me that makes me not get tired of doing all the things it has to do, and I think that's due to the game's ambiance and music. The graphics in this game are, well, I'd be lying if I said they were masterful, but for a PS2 game, they actually hold up very well, at least in my partially rose-tinted glasses. While I wouldn't call all the environments outstanding visually, they have just enough visual appeal to me that they can immerse me into the world. And there are a few standout locations for what it's worth, such as the Black Knight's Keep with its fog effect, the Shaoglen Woods with its unsettling air, the many crypt-like areas that have some actually creepy music, and the Meridell Plains. The music in this game is, I'd argue, to be one of the most underrated aspects. A lot of the music in this game can provide various tones to them, whether it be the warm frolicking in the field feel of the Meridell Plains, the nightmare fuel that possesses the Whirloop Crypts, the mystique of the Hall of Heroes, the grandeur of Meridell Castle, the list goes on. Each song provides a certain atmosphere to it that I can only describe as akin to Wonderland. It feels like a fairy tale world that you can escape to and experience all sorts of mood swings whilst on your adventure. With the environmental sound effects that are present in the live areas too, I find that this game can be surprisingly atmospheric, which is also one of the reasons that I hold this game close to my heart. Unfortunately, we now have to go back to the negative, and explore some of the more glaring issues that this game has on a technical level. To say that Neopets The Darkest Faerie released on the PlayStation 1 plus 2 in 2005 is a polished experience is like saying that Super Duper Subos is a show with a compelling narrative and emotional character arcs. Sure, it might be true in some areas, but that's it. While in a lot of cases, you have to go out of your way to look for glitches, sometimes they can pop up in the middle of a good day and make you have to restart from your last save point. There's even one glitch at the start of the final act that can soft lock your entire save file. And this isn't even getting into the more deliberate way to tear off the code. Go and look at any sort of speedrun for this game and you'll see that it's incredibly easy to break this game if you know what you're doing. This includes the usual speedrunning techniques, like skipping whole segments and getting to areas that you're not supposed to go to in the story. But the most interesting one to point out is how, if you know the right methods, you can get to an area that was cut from the game altogether called the Ancient Castle Spires. This area, to be frank, looks incredible. It was supposed to be in between the Knight's Crypts and the Meridau Treasure Vault, though for whatever reason it was just cut, probably due to time constraints. There are many aspects of the area that are unfinished, but there are some unique puzzles, some cool towers to climb, and you even have to stop an elevator from falling into the lava. It's a really cool final area to explore, and it's a real shame that this was cut from the final product. And this isn't the only thing that was cut either. Huge credit goes to Monster860 for posting a ton of the unused content that is hidden in the code. He is the unsung hero when it comes to dissecting this niche game that only a small amount of people like me care about. There was apparently a segment of Fiore's tower in which there was some sort of boss rush before you reached Darkest Faerie, which explains why the final boss is so short and underwhelming, though it obviously wouldn't fix all the issues the final boss has. There's an unused flying minion that was present in a cutscene in the story but wasn't actually encounterable. There's a whole side quest which isn't normally accessible in-game at the final act due to some sort of mistake in the coding. And there's even some unused music, one of which was present on the official site of the game, which is what's playing now. All this unused content and even some of the flaws I talked about before construct a singular narrative about this game. This was most definitely rushed. While we don't know for sure why this content got removed, I feel like it's a pretty safe assumption as to why some part of this game is detailed and why there's lots of content to do and why some parts got removed. Kind of like another first-party series that's also, shall I say, not at its full potential to say the least. And that's the thing that disappoints me most about this game that I treasure so much. I can see the ambition being put into aspects like the exploration, music, and world crafting. I know there's passion into this game, otherwise there wouldn't be as much content as there is. And yet, for whatever reason, the game never reached its full potential with what it could do. Maybe it was due to being rushed, maybe it was just too much work to handle. Maybe areas were cut because they felt it wouldn't fit in with the rest of the game. Who knows? Not me, and I doubt we'll ever know. I would not call this game a classic by any means. It has pretty serious flaws in its design, but for what it does right, it manages to craft a fairy tale-like experience with exploring the world, helping people out, and raking in on the rewards. If there's any reason I could recommend this mediocre PlayStation 2 game, it's for that. I doubt everyone will feel the same way as I do with this game, and for good reason, but at least for me, I'll always have good memories with this game, and I'll never stop wishing that the developers look back one day at this old game and give it life on a modern next-gen system, even if I know that won't come true. Hey, a guy can dream about seeing an HD furry game on the PlayStation 5.